If I were to describe HLPF in one word, it would be testing.
HLPF in one word, recommendations.
HLPF in one word, hypocritical.
HLPF in one word is connections. I am Lua, I am from Brazil, I am a trans feminist, and I belong to an organization called Libertarian Union of Trans People and Travestis in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil.
I am Ifáṣínà Efunyemi. I am from Belize. I am a founder, one of the co-founders of two women's organizations, PETA, which is promoting empowerment through awareness for lesbian and bisexual women, and POWER, which is the productive organization for women in action.
And I'm Yvonne Oduor. I work with the Gay and Lesbian Coalition of Kenya, in Kenya. And I'm many things. Part of it is a OutRight UN fellow.
So my expectations were like, I wanted to be warmer because during CSW it was very cold, I was very sick, and I was expecting to be a little bit not so overwhelming, and yeah, I think that's all.
To be honest, my expectations for HLPF were just as same as CSW. I came in anxious about how intense it was going to be because CSW was super intense, super fast, like a lot of things were happening at the same time. We were just learning the mechanisms, at least I was, and then we were just like shoved right into the deep end. And I'm honestly pleasantly surprised that it wasn't like that. Yeah.
I expected to be on Belize's delegation this time, and that still didn't work out. And I also expected that I would have been able to have a meeting with our permanent representative here, and that also did not happen. But I was able to see her in a side event that Belize, our country, had actually hosted, which was a good thing. And she did say she was going to get in touch with me before I left New York. So there is still hope.
I have a very memorable moment from HLPF, which was the Beyond Binary event that happened in the UN, which was the time we could see so many queer people inside the UN, and that is so important because it brings visibility, and it's so important for the representation of queer people as well. So those delegations and those UN representatives can see that we exist and that we are fighting for our rights and that we are fighting a lot, and the UN can do much better for the queer people, especially for trans people of color, intersex people who are still very marginalized. And I could see during the event that many statements, very powerful statements, were made by Kat that just arrived. And I believe that the event on Beyond Binaries was so important because Kat was there, which was brilliant, and also because we need to keep talking about these issues of the binary bias, and we need to break it, and especially because we are coming here to attend so many UN events, and we can see that each time we suffer from this binary bias and also from the non-recognition of our identities, of our names, something that is ours, that is so basic, and the UN should already be aware of this, and it's not, so the awareness must continue.
Hi, I am Kat from Botswana, Kat Kai Kolanyane or Katlego Kai, depending on which you can pronounce.
Yeah, so I have to agree with Lua about the most memorable moment being Beyond Binaries, because I remember walking into the UN security place and looking ahead, and I saw like a queer, openly queer presenting person getting through the machine, and I was like, wait, what is happening here today? Then I remembered it's our event. Like, there were so many queers in one place, and that is not an experience I've had here, and I did not know how important that was. And on the panel had really amazing, really brilliant queer folks, trans folks, non-binary folks, talking about the experiences, talking about what we can do to make the world better, to make the world more welcoming to trans and non-binary identities. And for a long time, I feel like trans people have stepped up. They're like, we are here, and this is what we want, and this is how it can be done. And I feel like it's time people listen more, because we already have the answers. Like, it's not like you'll be creating something that is so unimaginable. Like, we already have the answers, we already have suggestions and recommendations. So I think that people should listen more. Yeah.
What I liked about it was the fact that I was able to actually live stream it, and so it gave my people at home the opportunity to be a part of that experience, to actually hear and see the representation here at the UN. I think that is, for me, is memorable and most important. Even when I was able to make the statement on behalf of the women's major group, those things are significant at home, because it means that we get to be in the room, and being in the room is so important. There's so many missing people from this space. So I'm glad that we are able, through this fellowship, to be in this space and to bring that representation that otherwise would not be here.
Yeah, I mean, as the person who was fortunate enough to be on the panel for Gender Beyond the Binaries, that was a great moment for me. It was, because of this fellowship, a reunion with a few other people, so that was also quite, really, it was thrilling, because to be able to occupy space with people who don't just know you for the work you do, but value everything that you do and you represent, and are keeping up to date with everything that we're doing because we're fellows and we've been able to occupy these high-level spaces, has been really, really wonderful for me. I do think, though, the most memorable moment for me was being able to moderate the LGBTQ stakeholder group meeting at the women's major group meeting. Just to be able to show and give people an awareness of the fact that, you know, LGBTQ plus persons aren't necessarily only focused on human rights related issues. So to be able to tie in queer lives into SDGs has been really quite wonderful for me. And also just getting UNDP as a global entity which operates in a lot of our countries, to understand that as much as they might think they're doing good work, they could do much better if they involved trans and non-binary persons. So that was really, that moment was the best for me.
Challenges, I'll go first. I'll say that I felt really disappointed that I did not know anyone from the Kenyan delegation that was here. I saw one person, she's like a celebrity in my country, and she was reading a statement on behalf of the Kenyan government, and that looked strange for me because I do not know her to be involved in any of the human rights work back at home, and for her to be like a face of that is a bit concerning for me. It's a challenge because I feel like we need, as queer folks back in my country, to be more involved in these processes back at home. It's something we are not doing. I do not know why, and I'm very envious of my colleagues who are very involved in their governments and in the are actual stakeholders in the back at home in these processes that Kenya is not, and it's a challenge for me and for activists back at home, queer activists, to get more involved, right? Yeah, so that I'm not seeing people standing up reading for Kenya and I'm like, who is that? You know, like, yeah.
When it comes to me and my government, the challenge again continues to be making that connection with the mission here. And I am very concerned about that, because as an advocate on the ground at home, I don't like being ignorant of what will be said on my country's behalf. And even when I've been in the meetings and have been to see who is sitting at Belize's position, one day it wasn't even a person from Belize. It just happens to be a person that is working with an entity that Belize is a part of, which is the Alliance of Small Island Developing States. And this person is not even a Belizean. So I was concerned, like, okay, then I could have been sitting in that seat. If you're going to just have a seat, a person in a seat, why not make it be a Belizean who is there and who is willing to be present for the country, you know? So that is a challenge that I want to tackle, and I want to tackle it from the top by talking to the Prime Minister about it.
Yeah, I think the challenges are to make the states and the member states to realize how important is the Sustainable Development Goals for the world, actually, like for us to survive, like the world, like the Sustainable Development Goals have a really broad spectrum of ideas and goals, and that can save many lives and can save our world. And the member states I don't think they realize the importance yet. Like I don't see the engagement. Should be stronger engagement on this issue. And also I felt very disappointed to see that the states don't bring the challenges and they face to implement the Sustainable Development Goals in their countries, and how it's difficult because we need to be aware of how hard it is to put in practice this. We don't need to be lying about. They should be honest about, because if they are honest, we can think about together how to overcome these challenges.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I think for me, what I would term as a challenge is, as Lua said, there's a degree of self-congratulation that I think doesn't allow for progress to be made. I do believe that we need to be much more feminist in our approach to the SDGs. We need to be much more intersectional with our approaches to the SDGs and what kind of programming that we've got going on and how we assess them. So the challenge for me has been the fact that as much as we've been here queering HLPF, it doesn't feel like there's anything that's going to be done after this. So it just kind of feels like we've got strong opinions, but there's very little on the greater scale that can be done. Thankfully, having engaged with members of the ministry, members of the delegation from Botswana, I know that there's a possible avenue for follow-up. So it's on me then to say, hey, remember when we sat in New York? Let's have more conversations, let's bring in a few more people, so we can at least start addressing how we can queer it, but also get queer folk involved as well, as Yvonne was saying.
One of the things I truly appreciate about this space is how organized civil society is when it comes to being in New York. The women's major group meeting all the time, even when you look at the LGBTI stakeholder group, also pre-preparing for meetings and strategizing, even managing time efficiently, so that if all you get is 30 minutes or all you get is an hour, you know exactly what the pertinent issues are, who's going to ask the questions, how you're going to direct what you're going to say, so that it's pointed, it's precise, it is very specific. I would like that skill to be developed in my country. So that is something I want to take back to the LGBT organizations in Belize, so they understand the importance of us being cohesive, the importance of us being organized. And when we speak with one voice. That is not just this scattered chattering like a marketplace, that we need to be focused, especially when we come to spaces like this one.
One of the challenges that has stuck with me, and like I continue to think about every time I wake up and I'm to come to the UN for HLP, it's because the diplomacy around the UN mechanisms. Like, for example, we were talking about, I can't remember the day exactly, but we were talking about reducing the economic gaps between entities, countries, and like the world generally, right? So different countries are talking about reducing income disparities. And Israel is reading the statement about how they are doing that, right? They're reducing inequalities in the world. And when they finish doing that, the room claps. And that threw me off. And I think it's something I'll have to reconcile by myself between what this means in the UN space and what countries are actually doing on the ground, and that we all know they are doing. And then where do we draw the line, right? Like, is it okay to boo at the UN and be like, free Palestine, like while you're reading, Israel is reading that statement?
Balancing diplomacy, right?
Because that was what was going through my mind the whole time she was reading the thing. But she finished it, the whole room clapped for her, and we moved to the next speaker. So that's like, at times the things that happen here, like how do we reconcile our personal activism and our personal stance and where we stand in the world on things, and then what it means to be in the UN and what it means to be diplomatic, and looking at the bigger picture here, and just like focusing on the end goals, like just reconciling those two is something that I'll have to sit with and figure out, I guess.
But I wonder, is it important for us to be diplomatic? Because I got to the point of saying F diplomacy. Seriously, because at the end of the day, it's hypocritical. That would be my word. When I listen, for example, and remembering CSW and remembering how in the case of El Salvador, for example, women being arrested and just rotting in jail just on the suspicion of having committed an abortion, and then hearing the Salvadoran presenter talk about what they were doing for women, I'm like, that's outrageous to me, because CSW was just in March and this is the reality in El Salvador. So what are you talking about? But there isn't even a space there for me to challenge that person.
Yes.
You know, and that I see a problem with. That's what makes the forum hypocritical.
Yeah. And the countries should confront the countries that say something that is hypocritical, and because they should have an accountability with each other. They should have more accountability between each other.
But I mean, one would argue that is why the VNR gives you the opportunity to leverage this, right? So when El Salvador comes and says something that is untrue, if they don't say it, then you don't have grounds to challenge them. But now that they've said it, it gives the opportunity perhaps in a different space. So I guess this forum isn't necessarily for, let's get into the ring and like have bouts to argue it out and be as activist and advocate as we want to be. But at least it gives an opportunity for people on the ground in El Salvador, for example, to hold people accountable, to say, well, you said this, prove it. So I would say those are the kinds of tools that we could essentially also have as takeaways.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I do think that the goal for us at some point is to be delegates. So we're not just attending the thing, but we're part of ensuring that as queer identifying folks who have the inside knowledge of such systems to advocate for our presence. So we're not doing it because we are queer identifying persons, but we're doing it because we are people who care about the positions of persons in our countries in such spaces. So yes, we walk in as queer folk, but our arguments and our politics don't stop at us being queer.
Yeah.
We care about more than just our,
Exactly. I think that this, to summarize, I think it is like we recognize the privilege to be here.
Yes.
And all the people in the UN, the representatives, the delegations, they should also recognize their privilege to be here fighting for a better country. So I think that's it.
Yeah, exactly. And for the country to use our taxpayers' money to get you to come to the UN to give, like, for example, the country's stand and statements, I think people should take it more seriously. And I think I will Instagram the Kenyan delegate who was sent here and ask her, like, like what that process was, how they got into getting her here. Like I feel like I need to do more for my country in regards to being in these UN spaces and UN mechanisms. So I commit to doing that at least.
Yes, and I'd like to see more of us in this space, more of my people in this space, because it is so important for our voice to be heard in the UN and for it to be respected.